Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The cold winds of the distant planet Arden lapped against the windows of the secluded cabin where Jack Hendricks sat, staring at the crackling fire. The flames danced, flickering reflections in his tired blue eyes, but no warmth could touch the void in his heart. He had once been the president, the leader of the most powerful alliance of human colonies in the galaxy. But that seemed like a lifetime ago now. After losing his re-election campaign, he had retreated into the shadows, a ghost of his former self. His world had grown smaller, quieter, and painfully irrelevant. He sipped from a glass of aged whiskey, feeling its sharp bite on his tongue. The galaxy had moved on without him. It always did. Power was like water. It flowed to whoever held the largest dam. Hendricks had lost that dam when the people turned their backs on him, choosing someone else to lead. He thought he'd made peace with it until the message came. A soft chime echoed through the room, interrupting his thought. He frowned and glanced at the encrypted tablet lying on the table. The comm systems were supposed to be secure, isolated even, but somehow someone had reached him. Slowly, he placed the glass down and picked up the tablet, pressing his thumb against the interface to unlock it. The familiar face of General Elier Mason filled the screen. Even though the message was pre-recorded, her expression was tense, the lines on her forehead deeper than he remembered. Alaura had been his most trusted military advisor, a woman who had shared the burden of leadership during the darkest days of his presidency. Jack, her voice, though, recorded, carried a weight that cut through the digital barrier. I know you wanted to disappear, but we don't have that luxury anymore. You need to see this. The screen shifted to a series of images, satellite photos, reports, and schematic. At first, it didn't make sense to him, just another batch of military intel, but then the image of a massive weapon caught his eye, his breath hitched. The Omega Cannon Dolores voice continued. It exists, and it's worse than we imagined. Governor Kyle has it, and he's planning to use it. Jack, you know what this means? We need you. The galaxy needs you. Contact me if you're ready. The screen flickered back to her face. I know you said you were done fighting, but you were the only one who can stop him. Hendricks let the tablet fall from his hands, his mind spinning. Omega Cannon, a super weapon capable of destroying entire planets, was supposed to be a myth, a deterrent, an idea to keep rogue factions in check. But if Alaura was right, if Carcel, the dictator who ruled the planet Phyrexan with an iron fist, had control of it, the consequences were too horrifying to contemplate. He stood up, the weight of the decision pressing down on his chest. Could he really walk away from this? He had promised himself he would never return to that life. The political games, the impossible choices, the deaths he couldn't prevent. But how could he turn his back on a threat that could wipe out millions, maybe billions? The fire crackled behind him, but Hendricks felt nothing but cold. He stared out the window, the vast expanse of Arden, a frozen wilderness, stretching endlessly before him. The decision had already been made, hadn't it? Even if he wanted to stay hidden, he continued not. With a deep breath, he activated the secure comm link on his tablet. Alaric's appeared. Live this time. Tell me everything, he said, his voice steady though inside. The storm had already begun. The old crew assembled quickly. Hendricks wasn't sure if it was a testament to their loyalty or to the gravity of the situation, but within days, they were all together again, each bringing their own set of skills to the mission. The ship they commandeered was a stealth-class frigate, fast, nimble, and perfect for the kind of infiltration they were planning. Alaura was the first aboard. The general hadn't changed much. Her posture still screamed military discipline, and her eyes still carried the weight of too many battles fought. She nodded at Hendricks as she walked up the ramp. Hell of a way to get the band back together, she said, her tone dry, but her expression softened as she met his gaze. Are you sure you were ready for this? But that never stopped me before. Next came Riley Cade, the hacker who had been responsible for more classified leaks than Hendricks cared to remember. He had a grin plastered across his face, a cocky swagger in his step, but beneath the bravado, Hendricks knew Riley's sound mind was always 2 steps ahead of everyone else. Man, I never thought I'd see you again, Jack. Thought you'd retired to a beach somewhere with a couple of those drinks with the little umbrellas. Teddy Riley clapped Hendricks on the shoulder as he boarded. I am not much of an umbrella guy. Riley smirked. Good to know. Dr. Erlin Grace, the scientist and engineer who had designed many of the weapons and defense systems used in Hendrix' administration, was the last to arrive. She was quiet, introspective, but when she spoke, everyone listened. Her knowledge of planetary defenses would be crucial to disabling the Omega cannon, and Hendrix knew they would need every ounce of her brilliance. When Zara Kylene, the infiltration specialist, finally joined them on board, there was a moment of tension. Zara had been a mercenary before joining Hendrix' team during the height of his presidency. She was good at what she did, too good, perhaps, but there was always something about her Hendrix couldn't fully trust. He had kept her at arm's length before, and he felt that same instinct flare now. Nice crew, Zara said, eyeing the others as she stepped inside. Argy, what's the plan, boss? Hendrix took a deep breath. He could feel the weight of the mission settling over them like a storm cloud. The plan is simple, he said. We go in, disable the Omega cannon, and take out Kyle before he has the chance to fire it. No mistake. Riley raised an eyebrow. The ship hummed to life as they lifted off from the barren surface of Arden. Hendrix stood at the helm, staring out into the vast expanse of space. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to wonder if he had made the right choice, but there was no turning back now. As they streaked through the stars toward Phyrexin, Hendrix couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The mission was dangerous, yes, but it was more than that. There were too many variables, too many unknowns, and Zara was a wild card. Phyrexin loomed ahead of them, a planet shrouded in darkness, its cities encased in iron and steel, the mark of a world under Kaol's oppressive rule. Hendrix could feel the tension in the air as they prepared to enter the planet's atmosphere. Riley tapped away at his console, working to bypass the planetary defense system. Give me a minute, and I'll get us through. Without setting off any alarms, Turahi muttered, Locks. The ship jolted slightly as they broke through the atmosphere, but they remained undetected. The city below them was a sprawling mass of industrial complexes and military fortification. Hendrix couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. This was Kalos' domain and they were trespassing. Landing zone ahead, Riley said. Looks like an old maintenance facility. Should be quiet. The ship descended smoothly, landing with barely a sound. Hendrix stood, checking his sidearm. This is it? He said, we get in, disable the weapon, and get out. No heroic. The team nodded, and they moved out into the shadows of Phyrexin. The infiltration went smoothly at first, too smoothly, Hendrix thought. They moved through the lower levels of the city, avoiding detection with Riley's set help as he hacked into security feeds and rerouted patrol. But then everything went wrong. They were halfway to the Citadel when alarms blared through the city. Red lights flashed, and the sound of boots on metal echoed through the narrow corridor. We've made it. Bella growling. SciFiMovies. The team sprinted through the industrial maze, dodging guards and ducking under pipes as they made their way toward the Citadel. The air was thick with tension, and Hendrix could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on him. And then as they neared the control room, Zara turned on them. A knife flashed in the dim light, and Hendrix barely had time to react as Zara lunged at him. Alara tackled her, and the two women crashed to the ground in a flurry of punches and kicks. You were always too trusting, Zora sneered as she fought. Not anymore. The fight was brutal, and Hendrix watched in shock as the woman he had once called an ally tried to kill them. But Alara was faster, stronger, and she managed to pin Zara to the ground, her knee pressed against Zara's throat. You picked the wrong side. Zia's eyes flickered with defiance before they dulled. The fight was over, but the damage was done. She was working for Karale, Alara said, breathing heavily as she stood. We need to move. They rushed into the control room, but Hendrix couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The door to the control room slid open with a hiss, revealing a vast chamber filled with consoles, holographic displays, and the soft hum of machinery. At the far end, the ominous shape of the Omega cannon's SAS control system loomed like a predator waiting to strike. Hendrix took a deep breath, his mind racing through the plan. It was supposed to be simple, disable the weapon and take out Carol, but with Zara's betrayal, the odds had tilted dangerously against them. Riley, get us access, Hendrix ordered, his voice sharp. Riley was already at a terminal, his fingers flying across the controls as he bypassed the security system. Elara stood watch near the door, her blaster drawn and her eyes scanning the room for any sign of movement. The tension was palpable, the sound of Riley's typing the only noise, cutting through the thick air. "I am," and Riley muttered, his eyes focused on the screen. "This thing's got layers of encryption, but I can shut it down. Just need a few minutes." Hendricks nodded, his grip tightening around his weapon. "You've got two. We can't afford any more delay." He paced the room, his eyes darting between the control panels and the massive weapon displayed in the center. The Omega cannon looked even more monstrous up close, its sleek design and terrifying potential making it clear just how much power Carol had seized. If they didn't stop him, entire worlds would be obliterated with the press of a button. "Got it," Riley said, a hint of triumph in his voice. "I then disabled the targeting system. The cannon sits dead in the water." Hendricks allowed himself a brief sigh of relief, but it was short-lived. A cold, mocking voice filled the room, echoing off the metal walls like a sinister melody. Well, what do we have here?" The fallen president and his band of misfits. Hendricks turned slowly, his heart sinking as Governor Carroll stepped out from the shadows, flanked by a squad of heavily armed guards. The dictator's smirk was as sharp as the blade he carried at his side. His dark, regal armor gleamed under the dim lights, and his eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto Hendricks with a gaze that promised nothing but death. Theo clapped his hands slowly, mockingly. "I must say I am impressed. You managed to get this far. You really think I wouldn't?" Hendricks did teeth flinch. "You were too late, Carol. The Omega cannon is disabled." Carol's smile widened. "Oh, Jack, you always were too sentimental for your own good. Do you think I'd trust a single system to control the most powerful weapon in the galaxy?" He gestured toward the control panel Riley had just hacked. "That's only part of it. There's secondary failsafe, one that you will never reach in time." Riley's face drained of color. He sensed bluffing. He muttered under his breath, but even he did sound convinced. Carell took a step forward, his eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "No bluff, Mr. Cadade. The failsafe is buried deep within the cannon's core. It will activate automatically in 5 minutes, and when it does," he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Hendricks' mind raced. 5 minutes. That wasn't enough time. They couldn't possibly reach the core and stop the failsafe before the cannon went online. Desperation clawed at him, but he shoved it down. This wasn't over yet. He glanced at Elara, who had already moved to position herself between Carol and the rest of the team. Her posture was tense, ready for the fight she knew was coming. "Get to the core," Hendricks said, his voice low but firm. "I'll handle crap." Elara's eyes widened in protest. Gole barked, cutting her off. "That sent an order." She hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding and turning to Riley. "Come on, we've got work to do." Riley followed her without a word, and Dr. Grace fell in behind them. Hendricks watched them go, his heart pounding as they disappeared through a side door, leaving him alone with Carol and his guard. Kyle chuckled softly, drawing his blade. "Always the martyr, Jack. You never did learn when to quit." Hendricks coiled his shoulders, his eyes locking onto the dictator. "I never quit on the people I swore to protect. That's the difference between you and me." Kyle's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, murderous glare. "We'll see about that." The next moment exploded into chaos. Carol lunged forward, his blade flashing toward Hendricks in a blur of deadly precision. Hendricks barely had time to dodge, his body moving on instinct as he rolled to the side and fired his blaster. The shot went wide, but it was enough to force Carell back, giving Hendricks a moment to regroup. The guards moved in, but Hendricks was ready. He fired off 2 more shots, dropping one of them before they could close the distance. The second guard swung at him with a stun baton, but Hendricks ducked, delivering a swift punch to the man's gut before finishing him with a blaster shot to the chest. Gale snarled in frustration and lunged again, his blade arcing toward Hendricks' throat. This time, Hendricks was ready. He sidestepped the attack and swung his blaster upward, knocking the blade from Carell's hand. But Carell was faster than Hendricks had anticipated. He recovered almost instantly, delivering a brutal punch to Hendricks' jaw that sent him stumbling back. Hendricks tasted blood as he wiped his mouth, glaring at the dictator. "You're running out of time. Carell, you'll never win." Carell sneered, his breath coming in short, furious bursts. "I don't need time. I just need you dead." With a roar, Carell charged again, but this time, Hendricks didn't give him the chance to get close. He aimed his blaster and fired the shot, catching Kyle in the shoulder and sending him crashing to the ground with a cry of pain. The dictator's blade clattered to the floor, and for a brief moment, everything went still. Hendrix stepped forward, his blaster trained on Carol's chest. It sounded over. But Carol just laughed, the sound low and hollow. You think this ends with me? You have no idea what's coming, Jack. Even if you stop the Omega cannon, you can stop what's on next. Hendrix, finger tightened on the trigger. Watch me. Before he could fire, the door behind him burst open, and Alara and the others rushed back into the room, their faces pale and strained. We've got a problem, Alara said breathlessly. We can shut down the core. The failsafe's already in place. It's gonna go off. Hendrix felt a cold knot of dread settle in his gut. How long? 2 minutes, maybe less. He glanced at Kyle, who was still lying on the floor, clutching his wounded shoulder, a twisted smile on his lips. You were too late, the dictator rasped. It's over. Hendrix stared down at him for a long moment, his mind racing. 2 minutes, that wasn't enough time to stop the failsafe, but there had to be another way. There was always another way. Get to the ship, he said quietly. Alara blinked in confusion. Get to the ship, he repeated, his voice firmer this time. I am staying. Alara's eyes widened in shock. No, Jack, you can. There's no other way, he said, cutting her off. If I stay, I can manually override the core and trigger a shutdown, but someone has to stay behind to do it. No, she said again, her voice breaking. We can find another way. We don't have time, he said gently. You know that. Now go. Riley stepped forward, his face pale. Jack, go, Hendrix said more forcefully this time. That says an order. Alara's expression crumpled, but she nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. You better be right behind us. He gave her a small, sad smile. I'll do my best. Without another word, Alara, Riley, and Dr. Grace turned and ran, disappearing down the corridor toward the ship. Hendrix watched them go, his heart heavy with the weight of what he was about to do. He turned back to the console, his hands shaking as he began the override process. The timer was ticking down rapidly, each second, bringing them closer to destruction. Behind him, Carol chuckled weakly. You really think you were going to pull this off? You were a fool, Jack. Hendrix didn't respond. He focused on the console, his fingers flying across the controls as the final seconds ticked away. And then with a sharp beep, the core began to shut down. Hendrix let out a long, shaky breath, relief flooding through him. He had done it. The Omega cannon was disarmed. The galaxy was safe. But he wasn't. The core's energy was destabilizing, and there was no way to stop the chain reaction. He could feel the heat building around him, the ground shaking as the core prepared to implode. Carol's laughter echoed in the chamber as the dictator realized what was happening. You will die with me, Jack? How poetic. Hendrix stared at the console, his mind strangely calm. He had made his choice. He'd saved the galaxy, even if it meant sacrificing himself to do it. As the walls began to collapse around him, Hendrix closed his eyes and thought of the people he had sworn to protect. He had done his duty, just as he always had. And then, with a blinding flash of light, everything went silent.